at Large on Newstalk 106 to 108.
Well, one of the aspects of the inquiry that is going to have to be dealt with is the often confusing facts surrounding the case of the death of Savita Halappanavar. I'm joined now by Kitty Holland of the Irish Times, who broke the original story. Kitty, you're welcome to the programme.
Hello, yeah.
Kitty, on the 17th of November in The Observer, you wrote that there was no evidence as of yet that Savita had died for want of a termination. Can I ask you why that sentence, that very important sentence, was in your Observer article on the Saturday, but not in the original article that you wrote on the 14th of November for the Irish Times?
Well, I suppose throughout the original article, it was quoting the concerns of the husband, Praveen, and at no point, there was, it was hinted at in the headline, which obviously I didn't write, though in quotes, a refused determination was in quotes. I was reporting the concerns of the husband and what he said he was concerned about and what he said happened in the hospital, whereas my piece in The Observer was a more kind of background piece from my point of view, so it was obviously important for me to say quite explicitly that, it has not been established that the lack of access to a termination.
But can you see from the point of view of a lot of people that the contrast between what you wrote in The Observer and the headline on the original story, and I take your point that you did not write that headline, but it did travel around the world very quickly, that the assumption that this woman had died precisely because of a lack of termination?
Well, they were what I wrote were the concerns of the husband, and I suppose what readers decided to infer from that is what the concerns were of the husband and what he stated happened from his recollection of events in the hospital. Whereas, as I said, the piece in The Observer was a piece by me about the background, and I suppose the fact that a healthy, as far as we know, a healthy 31-year-old woman who was 17 weeks pregnant entered a hospital in 21st century Ireland and was dead a week later is a tragic story anyway, and would have been a big story anyway. A maternal death is very rare, but it's the husband's recollection or take on the events and his concerns that he wanted to talk about. That took it off around the world.
Okay, and can we just point on one fact of confusion between the Irish Times and RTE? Because on RTE's website there's a timeline attributed to the hospital itself, which states that, and it is the only date the timeline gives for which Savita was given antibiotics, and it states that she was given antibiotics on a Monday. However, in your original article, it clearly says that she was given antibiotics on a Tuesday. But then in the interview you did with Praveen Halappanavar, which was up on the Irish Times website, he says in the first 4 minutes of that interview that the antibiotics were administered on a Sunday. For those of us who are very confused by all of this, do you think you could help to reconcile those three different versions of events?
The HSE timeline is the HSE's timeline, which was Monday. He said to me that it was on a Tuesday, and as I recall during that interview, in the original interview I did with him when he was in India, he said Tuesday. He said she was started on antibiotics when she collapsed. When he says she collapsed,
which is on a Tuesday originally.
Tuesday evening, and she was getting very ill.
Fine.
Now he said to me in the interview when I spoke to him back in Galway that there was then was this the recorded one?
This is the recorded one on the Irish Times website, where he clearly says it was a Tuesday. Sunday. He says that on this interview he says the antibiotics were administered on a Sunday.
And was that the audio or was it a video? Okay, so there were two. The audio. All one can surmise is that his recollection of events is the actual timeline and days that may be a little muddled.
Okay.
It's just. He said to me at one point that she was given paracetamol and not antibiotics at one point in an interview as well, and not given antibiotics at any point. So, but one assumes she was given antibiotics,
right,
if she was that ill.
And I suppose this leads to the final question, in that what do you attribute the disparity between Praveen Halappanavar's assertion that the family asked for a termination, and the fact that the hospital records contain notes of requests for tea and toast and many other things, but they contain no request for a termination? And
again, we only have Praveen and his solicitors' take on what was in or not in the notes. So we're relying all the time on their take on what happened. I don't know. That's a huge gap, and if that is the case, and it is the case that termination was requested, and Praveen says that there were witnesses to these requests. So that will all come out in the inquiry. If that's not in the notes, as they say it's not in the notes, well, that is obviously a huge gap, and I suppose one may even wonder, are requests for terminations recorded at all in Irish maternity hospitals? But you're absolutely satisfied, despite saying that his recollection might have been muddled to a certain extent, you're satisfied that he did request a termination? Oh, I'm not satisfied of anything. I'm satisfied of what he told me, but I await as much as anyone else the inquiry and what the findings. I can't tell for certain. Who knows what's come out of this inquiry? Okay. They may come back and say, she came in with the disease she caught from something outside the hospital before she even arrived in, and that there was no request for termination, and we await with bated breath. Okay. But that's the events as recounted to me and recounted to many other people quite reasonably consistently by the husband. And the final question, just your thoughts and reaction. The point has been made that there is a coronial system, a system of coroner's reports, which is tried and tested. What do you think about the fact that the facts are going to be gathered by a group that is politically appointed, and that it seems that the coroner's report will be sidestepped, and throwing into the confusion we have this additional report from HICWA? Which of these three bodies should we give precedence to? Which of them should we believe? What if they conflict? Well, I suppose the coroner's the court will be the one that we can all feel is absolutely objective. The problem from Praveen's point of view with the coroner's inquest is that it will establish cause of death, but it may not establish why events led towards the cause of death. Also, there's no compellability of witnesses. I think there's a limit on how many medical witnesses can be called to a coroner's inquest. So there are limits. People say, it answers everything that Praveen and her family want, but it doesn't. I would feel that the HICWA investigation and the HSE ones will probably be reasonably reliable, but they don't satisfy the concerns of Praveen. Okay. Kitty, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Okay. Many thanks.